participants to join. There we go. And then we'll a bit of intro work at the start, and then we'll jump into the actual webinar. I think that's enough awkward silence to start it. There's a bit of housekeeping at the start anyway, so by the time we get through that, we should be at the point of getting up to attendees. So firstly, thank you so much for everyone attending, wherever you are in the world. Looks like from the attendee list, we've got a plethora of different countries in there, mainly based in the US from attendee size, but I saw there's a couple of other countries in there as well. Just some information before we start the webinar. So we've chosen Zoom as our hosting platform, mainly because it's got a really strong Q&A feature. So if you've got questions that you want to have asked throughout the session, please pop them into the Q&A. We've got a member of the team who is picking these up, and also we have left 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the session to run through these. Hopefully you've seen on LinkedIn, but we are also running some DoorDash vouchers, which are going to be for the top 3 questions asked both in the initial post. So I saw there's a couple of questions in the post, so thank you so much for everyone who submitted them, but also during the session we'll be keeping an eye on these. So the top 3 questions we get during the session or before, you'll get a DoorDash voucher. So good luck to everyone on that side. We also will be stopping at different intervals to ask questions. So despite there being a Q&A session, if there is questions that are applicable to the topics we're going through at that moment, we'll also touch on them. And then if you just want to have some chats with your peers throughout the session, there's also a chat functionality. Just make sure you set the setting as all participants, and then all your peers will see it. If it's just a chat specifically to the panelists that we've got here today, I probably would use the Q&A feature. So from an intro from my side, for anyone who doesn't know me and hasn't met me before, my name's Darren Ellicott. I head up our US marketplace here at hackajob. For anyone that doesn't know about hackajob, we basically exist to bring engineers and technologists together with companies that need them and continue to drive the world forward. So work with some really great organizations globally. We're all about creating the best experience for candidates. So we do a lot of different events. We do a lot of community webinars and help employers engage directly with candidates. And the platform is underpinned by about 50 million first-party data points. And we see about 1,400 different engineers go onto the platform live on a weekly basis. And then a hire is made about every 70 minutes. Steve, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself, if that's okay.
Hello there. My name is Steve Levy. I am an engineer who crossed over to the dark side into TA and HR many decades ago. There is a saying which includes there's no such thing as a former engineer. And so I have lived and breathed technology recruiting for 38 years. And I was, up until a few weeks ago, I was the manager of technical recruiting at Zipco. I graciously resigned to pursue other things that I needed to do at this time in my life. I popcorn over to Danielle.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle DeLibero, and I guess I also went to the dark side. I was a recruiter for many years, heads of talent acquisition, and then became the head of people and culture, which is not a common path usually for those who spend their careers in talent acquisition. And so I've been doing people and culture now for an organization since 2019. And recruiting obviously is near and dear to my heart, will always be. So there's no such thing as a former engineer, sort of no such thing as a former recruiter either. And tech recruiting is clearly part of the remit of our organization. So thanks. Sean?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sharon Dami, and I'm the VP of People and Operations at a company called Game Changer. We are a sports tech company, and I've been in both the tech startup side as well as some very big companies in the fintech space over the course of my career. So I did start in talent acquisition, like many of you probably joining us today. I have segued into lots of different areas, including the people realm, people and culture, finance and operations, consulting, but there is a special place in my heart for all things people and talent related. So excited to be here to share and learn from all of you today. Andy.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, so my name is Andy Chown. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition at Penguin Random House. My background predominantly started off in agency recruiting in the UK, spent a number of years in London, moved internally within the staffing industry, and then started hiring, so recruiting recruiters, business developers, that sort of things for a tech, I guess a tech, pharmaceutical, that sort of things. Staffing firm, moved over to the US almost 10 years ago. Love all things recruiting and talent acquisition based. Very excited to kind of talk about all the topics that we're going to cover today, and looking forward to getting stuck into it. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we've got 5 topics we're going to be focused on today. Like I say, during the session, we will stop for Q&A, but there'll be 5 as a kind of main side. So we'll jump in. So on hackajob side, it's been a turbulent couple of years from what we're seeing with companies transitioning, and we're seeing that the power is starting to move more towards companies when it comes to the hiring process and the interviewing process. So really want to understand, are you seeing this within your own business? And if so, what changes have you made? And we'll start with you, Andy.
Sure. So I guess it depends on a number of different things in terms of how you want to approach it, and I think in terms of, sorry, just before we start, I did notice someone's put into the Q&A, sort of kind of, is the chat disabled for anyone else? So I want to make sure before I get stuck into it, has anyone else seen that? I want to make sure that you're all able to have chat and or ask questions.
Nikki, can you pick that up during Andy's answer, if that's okay?
Yep, will do.
Thank you.
You want to just repeat the questions just so that everyone's up to speed? So
yeah, absolutely. So no worries. So the question was around kind of the turbulent nature of what we're seeing at the moment, and how, at least on a hackajob side, we've seen a big change in the market in the last kind of 12 to 18 months, where we're starting to see that companies hold more power when it comes to the hiring process, specifically in tech. And just wanted to see if you're seeing the same on your side, where it's flipped from candidates having the power to the end client or company having the power, and kind of what changes have you made?
Sure. So yeah, I guess it depends on how you look at it. And so try not to look at it as power. I feel like it's the sort of the swing of focus. And so from our side, I try and cast my mind back 12 to 18 months ago. There was, every company was looking to hire pretty much everywhere. And so within data and tech, they were very sought after among a number of other things. And so maybe you could look at it as power, you could look at it as desire to gain the best talent, you could look at it however you want to look at it, but there was a real swing in terms of everyone hiring for the same thing. I think for us, the big piece was what it actually meant to us as a business. So as the number one publishing firm, we are, or were used to having a decent amount of, I'll use the word power because, or a decent amount of presence is the best way of looking at it. And we have a great ability to draw people for publishing positions. For tech and data, a little bit less so. And when you consider how things had shifted, so for example, our HQ is in New York. And so we used to compete with the vast majority of firms in New York. then when it was work from home, it was pretty much anybody across the whole of the US. So we were competing with every single company that was operating remotely. And so we had to play catch up, and we had to kind of compete with that. And so it wasn't just the talent, it was the branding, it was getting our name out there over and above all of the other firms who were also looking for the same types of position. And so it wasn't just the sort of the power shift, and did companies have lots of power? Perhaps. Did they struggle to find and identify talent? Absolutely. And then it's trying to get that talent into your interview process and through the process in a quick enough time before anyone else had been able to snap them up. So I guess I kind of look at that as how we adapted and adjusted to the market conditions. And looking at where we are now, I feel like that shifted again. And there's, you know, at that time, I would say actually candidates had more power because everyone was looking to hire. Whereas now, and this I know hints at a couple of questions later on, you know, the market's shifted again, and so there's a little bit more uncertainty. So it's hard to really sit here and say this is exactly what happened. How have we changed it? What we're trying to do is make our processes swifter. You know, that's one of the things that my team and I have identified. And when I say my team, not just talent acquisition, but across our business and the tech teams and the data teams, we want to try and move people through the process smoother, swifter. We want the candidate experience to be a little bit better. So regardless of what the end result is, they've all had a good experience. That's our goal, and that's what we're working to kind of achieve. So I hope that starts off.
Awesome. Daniel?
I was just going to say, and if I may, and I think you ended it perfectly on the candidate experience there. When you asked the question, Darren, I instantly thought not necessarily about power and presence of an organization or their brand, but more so about the expectations that candidates have. And employers are now sort of holding themselves to a higher level of expectation of what they need to do for the experience. And so we want to make sure that when we think of that expectation, that, you know, there's a candidate out there who is going to share their experience. There are ways of doing that in a very positive way. There's ways of doing that in, you know, an exposing way. And so when years ago, I think employers would sometimes just have their process, and it was, well, if you want to work for us, this is how we do things. And now there's this mindset of, well, wait a second, whether you wind up working for us or not, you are still a representative of our brand. You applied to us for a reason. We want you to have a positive thing to say about us, even if you don't work for us. I think consumer brands probably were the first ones to catch on to this because they wanted to have remain loyal, you know, users of their products and users of, you know, all of their goods. But then more and more organizations, I think, started to catch on to say, this is clearly something we have to be paying attention to. This is part of our reputation. This is part of our brand. And ultimately, candidates apply again sometimes, right? And so you don't want to push off somebody just because the job isn't right now. They might come back to you. And so that candidate experience, I think, is really, when you think about, I know you use the word power in the conversation, but I don't think that if that's the word we were using in the past, companies no longer have the power to just ghost a candidate. Companies no longer have the power anymore to just, I mean, I'm sure some still do, but it is not in their best interest. It is not advantageous for them. And, you know, a savvy candidate will make sure that others are aware of that and expose that. And so I think expectations have equaled out over the years.
And I purposely use the word power because I think the power challenges people on stuff. So it's in there. I like that everyone's challenging the word on that side. Steve, love to get your thoughts on it as well.
Well, I figured as the engineer, I'm not going to use the word power. Power is a construct that was created by the man, Andrew Carnegie, you know, the Monongahela Plan back in the early 1900s, when the Pinkerton Guards quelled riots, work stoppages with guns. You know, that's the classic power struggle. I prefer to use the word energy, and it's the paraphrase: energy is neither created nor destroyed. And what we've seen in the last couple of years, I go back to when I graduated with my engineering degree in 1980. we were given a mechanical pencil and a plastic pocket protector because we had to wear suits, and there was such a gauntlet you have to run through to get to things, just to get to the interview. I won't even talk about onion skin paper and special fonts. But thankfully, we become substantially more human over the decades that all of us have been recruiting. I think it's that humanity that it's not power. It's what are we doing here? Is it? We've heard the phrase, no one on their deathbed says, I wish I'd spent more time at work. We don't do things like that. No one says, boy, I really wish I'd posted more on LinkedIn. My brand would have been much better. We don't do things like that. We realize that in this dance, in this energy dance, it's at the end of the day, there's only so much energy that we can, produce and give, and so there has to be a balance between the two of them. And I think we've over the last couple of years, particularly during the pandemic, we've realized that it's less about protocol and more about performance. Now, that seems to be lost on many companies who are saying we need you to return to the office because we're just missing that. We're missing that je ne sais quoi whiteboard coffee talk kind of rigmarole that we all know from experience just sucks up hours of the day. So the power, it's not a question of power. It's a question of the more astute companies are always questioning, why are we doing it this way? Are there better ways to do it? Are there more human ways to do things such that everyone, shareholders, leaders, workers, family members, are going to, customers are going to be able to, dance together, share energy, and produce something that's better than we've had before. Really the smart, savvy companies and the smart, savvy leaders are, some of them are recognizing it. Sadly, not as many are recognizing it. I'm going to call out companies like, anything that's owned by Elon Musk. You eat what you kill mentality, sleep at the office. I just don't see that turning into something, positive long term. Many companies produce tremendous returns for their shareholders by being human. And as talent advisors, and that's what this profession is about. Difference between sources, recruiters, and being true talent advisors is we're the ones who go to our leaders and say, look, if you do this, then you picked it up. We're going to ultimately harm the brand. Long-winded, but I'm a remote hybrid person till the day I die.
Well, I think you've moved us nicely on to the next question then, because the next question is all about that hybrid remote kind of model. So I think what we've seen on hackajob side through our last white paper, which we produced at the beginning of the quarter, it suggests to us that 60% of candidates from an engineering background have a preference to remote work, and around 40% of engineers will only consider remote work. So would love to get the stance of each of your businesses. Sharon, we'll start with you, because I know there's an interesting take on your side.
Yeah, so Game Changer was remote friendly and remote first, even prior to the pandemic. I know the pandemic has shifted a lot of companies that conventionally were not remote friendly into that sort of hybrid mode. We still operate on a remote friendly basis. We're still hiring people who are remote, and we don't have any expectations for people to come into the office ever. What we do have is opportunities for people in both a hybrid, remote, or in-office experience, and we work to enhance both our in-office experience as well as our remote experience. We want to make sure that regardless of where employees are choosing to work, and choosing is the key word here, we want optionality to drive engagement. We are making sure that they're set up for success. So we're implementing programs such as stipends and other things. And a lot of our in-person staff are also hybrid. So they may come in 2 days, they may come in 3 days, basically whatever is, easier for them or works for their lifestyle. And we want to make sure that we have equity across the programs that we offer, so that if people are feeling like, oh, if I'm in the office, I get X, Y, and Z, we want to make sure that if you're remote, you also have the same benefits. And I'll go into a few examples. I know that some of these are not always budget friendly when it comes to thinking about what programs you want to get off the ground, but we offer in office, we have snacks and drinks. So we've offered all of our employees a stipend of $60 a month. They can use that on a platform called Snack Magic. They can pick whether they want office supplies or if they want, a specific granola bar or a certain drink to get them through their workday. We have that available to all of our folks. Other things that we're doing, we offer a technology stipend of $4,000 when you first get started with us. We do a refresh every 2 years. We also have a $500 work from home stipend. So you can use that, it goes to all employees. Our new office, we're actually upgrading our office and making sure we're moving to a space that accommodates our growing employee base. We will have an office that has a gym. And so we've also offered our employees gym pass, so that if they are not near an office and they wanted to go to a local gym, that they're not missing out in any way. So for us, it's really important to drive home the fact that you don't need to be in an office to be productive. You don't need to be missing out on anything if you're remote. We're also allocating budget to get people together, because we notice that there's a lot of people that still want to collaborate in person. They want to connect with their peers. They want to get to know each other, even if they're in different time zones. So we are doing company offsites, we're doing team meetups, and we're allocating budget to different departments so they can control how they want to make that work for their teams. We're trying to put a lot of the ownership back on our employees and their managers to make this work in a way that makes sense for them. But, we recognize that we're in a position that we can offer that to our employees, but we get that not every employer can have a hybrid or even remote friendly workforce. Because we are in the position to do so, we want to make sure we've got both internal equity in how we distribute our budget to make that work for people, but also just the opportunity for them to give feedback so we can keep iterating on these programs.
Love that. So everyone's treated equally depending on where they're based. Love that. I think that's often missed in organizations, that you get different benefits depending on whether you're on site or off site. So I love that. Steve, love to get your opinion on it. Oh, I think you're still mute. While Steve's coming off mute, Danielle, do you want to pick it up?
There it is. There, I got it.
Okay,
I lost my mouse. Many monitors, small mouse. I lost my mouse. I'm going to echo the same thing that Sharon said, and I'm going to give kudos to Zip. Very, very similar packages. It's stipends. The office had way too many good snacks. That is a very big problem for, I don't have those snacks at home. I guess that's one reason why people come to the office, is to have cookies that you don't get at home. So we have all those things, all the energy drinks, catered lunch, full catered lunch 1 day a week, stipends, gyms, regular communication really is you can't over communicate when you have a remote or dispersed workforce, whether they're hybrid or not. Regular meetings, regular lunch and learn, Slack channels covering every type of possibility and personal, professional fetish you may have. All these types of things are there to create common ground between all employees. Zip is, again, 100% remote all the time, different time zones. People adapt to what it is they have to do. If you hire well, If you do, and this is one of the questions that somebody popped in there, it's a little too early for us to answer that, but if you hire well, if you hire for performance, if you hire for, it's really hard to hire for culture fit. Hopefully we won't have to get into that one. But if you have a very well-structured, human-centric, hiring process, you stand a better chance of getting good quality people. And those are the ones will get stuff done. Being able to articulate goals, tying, really no different than old school working, from a desk. Common goals, common ground, common enemies, common, friends. Just bring people together. This is the leadership piece, and that's the hard part of leadership that we really don't stress. It's I want to hold off on the cursing, but it's the no asshole rule. We know when someone's a schmuck. We know what a bad leader looks like. Don't tolerate it. And this is where HR needs to be that true advisor to leadership. Is when someone's behaving badly, address it. Listen to the grapevine. Listen to your exit interviews. Take that stuff seriously. Don't wait until it gets posted on, Glassdoor or Blind to address something. The moment you hear it, pull people aside. That's even more important in a remote environment, because the nuances of not being, in the same physical space, can be easily misinterpreted. That's a whole new level of leadership that you don't teach in business schools. Those of us who are parents, there's a lot of parenting magic that goes into being a leader for in the remote era. But everything that Sharon said, it's you have to spend money to make money. You have to spend good, smart money to create a more productive team.
And I think you touched on something interesting there, that I think the way you manage remotely is very different to the way you manage hybrid and the way you manage on site. And I think depending on how remote you are as a business, if you're globally remote, you also need to change in terms of the cultures you're dealing with. If you're dealing with someone in the APAC region, you're probably going to operate and manage them very different to someone in North American region and stuff like that. So I think that's a really interesting and important point on that side. Danielle, love to get your take on it as well, because I know you're a little bit different.
Yeah, a little different. I think Andy and I can relate to this, that when you work in an organization that actually has either manufacturing or production operations, you don't have that opportunity to have those people be remote, right? They have to come to the office. So what you don't want to do is create a haves and have-nots in your organization of folks who can take their laptop and be gone, and those who physically have to come to the office every day. And so what you do is you try to make sure that, as Sharon said, you have some type of equity in terms of what you're providing your employees, making sure they have similar experiences, but then also you really have to think about disparity of even those who are at home and working remotely. Some people don't have the same connectivity that others have, whether it's they can't afford it or they just happen to live in a place there that doesn't have, a great signal. There's lots of reasons why they don't have the same connectivity. You have people who are in unsafe environments at home. And so coming to work is a safe place for them to get away from. And this is where their haven is and their escape is. Something as simple as I have folks who come to the office all the time in the summer because boy, our air conditioning is pumping, and like, why put their AC on at home where they don't have AC? So there's all different reasons why that office can be a safe place, or the place to come to where you actually feel like you're productive and you don't have distractions, or it's more engaging, or it's just better from a productivity standpoint for whatever the productivity reason is. The other thing that you really want to think about is, what is it that we can do from a social experience? What can we do from a productivity experience? How do you provide the ability for your employees to have all of that while still remaining productive? I think a lot about how you have, Steve just made a mention of, you hire really good and you hire really well. And Sharon was saying, look, we were remote friendly from the start, and that's great. And that's your company culture. You plan for that. You know how to onboard people. You know how to plan for them to come on and manage them. For companies that were not remote friendly from the start, or remote only from the start, and went to a hybrid model and still maybe bring on new college grads or freshers and your uni grads, there was a very long legacy of they were indoctrinated to the organization by just being part of the day-to-day in the office. They learned by sitting in meetings. They learned by watching the dynamics between certain people. There's something to be said about the way that we interact as humans, and not to a flat screen all day long. And so if you've moved to a hybrid model after having been in office, these are some of the things you actually really need to be paying attention to, especially I think a lot of us who've worked for very many years and understand, company culture and company politics, like, we're tired. Yeah, send us home. We're happy to be hybrid. We're happy to be remote. We get it. We know how to do those dynamics. But there's an art to that you learn over the years by just being part of it. And if you don't have that ability to do it, you may actually lose that and that finesse and that ability to engage in relationships or meet people outside of your corporate circle or your project circle or your org chart, if you will, and your team. And so, I challenge companies to say I don't think there's one right answer. So I guess let's put it out there, right? Like, what works for one company won't necessarily work for another. But you have to know your company. You have to know what you're capable of doing. There are companies out there that are not going to be able to send vouchers out, or not be able to give stipends, or not, and still have to say, whether you want to admit it or not, you have disparities of where your people are working when they're home every day. A studio apartment with my laptop on my lap all day doesn't necessarily give me the same comfort as an ergonomic chair and a house that has a segregated office that I can use all day. So again, just thinking about your team members, thinking beyond your own experience is really important for the leaders of an organization. I think very senior folks assume everyone has what they have set up at home. And so of course they can all do it. And, you start to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. You realize that, the office is necessary for some folks. Steve's got his hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, very polite. Go on.
That was polite. That's the nicest you've been to me, Stephen. I'm very
After all these years, I know. Don't get used to it.
Wouldn't dare.
But there are a few things here. Part of it is, I say this to all the technical people who I interview, and particularly the remote piece. You can, as a group, engineers, technical folks don't like interviews anymore. They really don't like recruiters. We're children of the devil, things of that nature. But when you get on a video interview, and I apologize for my camera here, and probably I'm probably I'm telling people more about myself. I go, look, I know you don't like doing these things. I mean, we after all, both of us, I'm a lot like you. I lived my life at the intersection of ADHD Highway and Asperger's Boulevard. And so when we're put through these, behavioral interviews, which are more and more, I almost think of like an exorcist, like the Omen killing type thing. It makes technical people generally uncomfortable. And, face to face is hard enough, but doing it over video means we have to go do something extra special to get them to the point where they're comfortable. Many, and I'm sure this will be echoed by everyone here, many an engineer technical type I've interviewed, and you can tell they're distracted either by a child who's at home, a spouse who's at home, a pet who's doing bad things. And so what I end up doing is a more tactical thing. I say, who is it? Well, it's my son or my daughter. Bring them on board. Get them in front of the camera. And surprisingly, I make them laugh. So when the kids are laughing, when the dogs are laughing, I mean, I bring my office mates, my cats in, to show them the other cat, their energy level just turns more positive. And then they start, being more truthful. You can get real salaries out of them. You can get real deliverables out of them when you start treating them more as a human being who you understand what they're going through. I think that's one of the biggest changes to this remote era is it's forced the best people in TA to really, and I've said this before, to take a more human approach to what we do. That was the only thing. So everything was spot on, but again, be more human.
Awesome. We've had some really good questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to take us off topic for a minute and answer a couple of these. Just for everyone's knowledge, the panelists knew a lot of these topics up front, so I'm going to throw a curveball here and ask some questions they didn't know were coming. So be prepared, everyone. And Sharon, unfortunately, you're the first one I'm going to go to because the first one is aimed at that remote versus hybrid, and the crux of the question is about treatment of people, whether they're on site or off site, and making sure that everyone has a good experience. So the questions around the perceived aspect that if you are on site, you're more visible, so therefore you're more likely to get promotions, get given better assignments. So I'd love to understand what Game Changer are doing around that to challenge that perception.
Yeah, this is a great question. And it is something that I think can happen. So it's a real possibility that if you're, if you have executives in the office and you're constantly in the office, maybe you get to showcase your work more, maybe you get to pick their brain a little bit, and maybe you are favored for something that comes up. So I think that is a really real possibility in the workplace. And I think fortunately for us, a lot of our executives are also remote. So that may not happen as much, but we do try to bring people together, and we rotate through an extended leadership team, or we at least plan to, of bringing different people in together to get time with our senior leadership team, to be able to present their ideas, to get exposure and visibility. I think another important piece of this is that we are kicking off our talent review process next week. And as a part of that, we are talking about this goes beyond performance to talk about potential and development opportunities. And the way that we're doing this is set up as calibration sessions. So by department, we'll bring together leaders. They'll talk about the development and the opportunities for each person. And you start to get different perspectives. We're also going to be doing this cross-functionally. So you start to get different inputs from people that may be in another department that work with someone. Through having some of these processes, I think it helps alleviate some of the concerns around visibility. I think having more people in the room to talk about development opportunities, challenges, and things that are going really well for someone and stretch assignments becomes a lot more easier to equalize when you have a level playing field, when you have people that are remote that may not have exposure to some of the executives. Having those executives in the room to hear from other executives that do work with those people definitely helps with exposure, definitely gets, even our president to think about, oh, I didn't know that person. I didn't know that skill set. I'm going to actually have a one-on-one and do a skip level and get to know someone on a deeper level. So very real concern to have, but I think that there's ways to combat that. And I think the more that we embed into some of our people processes will also help and go a long way in making sure that we're not overlooking someone, that we're giving people equal opportunities in the workplace, and that we're doing our best to combat some of the really real issues in the workplace.
Awesome. Andy, coming to you next. This question's around how do you tell a candidate no and still maintain that best experience for them? So it's all about that candidate experience when going through hiring processes.
Sure. So I guess this is more from a general kind of interview perspective. My kind of training has been around delivering feedback and making it relevant. And so rather than just saying, unfortunately, no, being very particular, being able to outline not just what it was about the answer that you either feel doesn't fit, but also enabling them to kind of understand the broader context. And so what I would say is outline, here's what you said, or here's the answer you gave. here's why I don't feel like that's relevant, and here's how you can maybe move forward with adjusting and delivering a better answer in future, right? And so rather than I'm trying to use sort of Steve's lack of swearing. There's I guess a poop sandwich, right? You give the good news, bad news, good news. It doesn't fit right. And you know that anything that you say to begin with, then you've got the bit that you're saying, this is the reason why no, but then also you're a really good person and nice. What, like, that just never works. And so being able to say, well, like, breaking it down, here's your answer, here's why it's not suitable, and here's what I think you can do in the future. It's a nicer flow. And so I feel like being able to kind of deliver, and that can be for any question or any answer or any bit of feedback. So I think one of the best ways of putting it is like the action, the impact, and the do. So here's the action, here's what you said. The impact, here's why it wasn't relevant. Here's what I think you should do moving forward for future opportunities. And that you may deliver feedback at the very end. Sometimes you get, you have, I think the beauty of it is also, it enables, as long as you're open to it, enables more conversation for the candidate to either specify and articulate why maybe I've misunderstood something. And then I can kind of, you have more of a discussion. It should be a discussion and a conversation. I feel like regularly interviewing is kind of spotlight on the candidate, tell me exactly why. And if you mess up one thing, there's so much stress and pressure on them. And so trying to remove that and having a conversation and exploring, one of the, exploring the reasons why they may or may not be good. In that fashion, competency and behaviorally is a really, really good interview structure. And that's something that and so they kind of go hand in hand. It's not just being able to deliver feedback and an answer, it's being open to having a conversation around how they answer and what those answers mean in comparison to the broader market, who else they're interviewing with relation to the job itself. So I hope that answers.
I think we got some follow-ups as well. Very, very, and Danielle's joined the same train of putting hands up as well. So Steve, I'll let you go first, and we'll move on to Danielle.
Thank you. Intake, rubric, assessment. We've built rubrics for every position, detailed rubrics, constructs, what qualifies as basic, minimal, strong, superb, build assessment instruments that follow that. We've all been in debriefs when someone says, well, I just don't feel there'll be a good culture fit. I go, no, that's what you're feeling there is the bad burrito you had for lunch. That's not, if you didn't ask a question and you're going with your I feel answer, I will say this, Andy, that I told people you're full of crap sandwich. Is that okay? Is that about right? It goes to the intake. Way too many companies recruit, source, recruit, engage with the most generic of job descriptions. No performance, no initiatives, no deliverables, no metrics of success. How many people in the audience, how many people here have seen hiring managers that said, just send me more, I'll know it when I see it. And we're all thinking, you dumbass, if you can't describe it for me now, how will you know it when you see it? Well, I have ESP. No, you don't. I know I don't. Andy, I know you don't. Darren, I know you don't. The other two probably, but not us. And so that is a lazy recruiter. That's lazy TA, but not articulating the true details of the position. If your job description is such that you can take your company name off it and put some other company names on it, that's a bad job description. Initiative, from tech standpoint, ethics, story points, they change quarter by quarter. Capacity changes almost monthly. Articulate those things. Those will be used to, engage somebody. Look, we're doing this here. Are you doing that where you are? And ultimately, these lead to criterion for what are your criteria for assessment? At Zip, we send everybody, ultimately, this is what we're using to assess. This is how how the interview went. This is the scores you received. This is why we're passing. You give real stuff that's related to the real job.
There you go.
And I think it ties perfectly. I was going to actually just bring us all the way back to 30,000 feet and just say, for Jeffrey's question, just telling somebody their status is the first thing you need to do. There's so many companies who just make a hire and then close the rec and don't ever tell anybody what the status is of the people who went through their process or weren't even reviewed. I think making sure you disposition every candidate in a timely manner is the most basic thing you can do, that at least you can't sort of argue if it was a positive or negative experience. The fact is, they at least were treated fairly and respectfully and given the time back that they gave to your organization. And especially if your company has an online application that is ridiculously long or requires login and passwords and all those things. But I think all the things Andy said, all the things Steve said are fantastic, but that's even above and beyond, the idea of just dispositioning a candidate in a timely manner, dispositioning all of them.
Awesome. Andy, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to try and tie it back to the original question, actually. But I think I echo everything that everybody said. And timely feedback, absolutely. Giving feedback to a candidate that is a no, I think being honest with them like that, like they just want the honesty. Candidates are able to tell if you're just giving them a kind of a shuffle off, and so it adds in the humanity that Steve's been talking about. It adds in the timeliness, the candidate experience, all of that side of things. And Steve kind of highlighted job descriptions. Now, I was going to, from the original question, which is, we're seeing more companies pull back. When I say the original question, kind of from the start, which is, the hybrid model and how are we doing that? Being really clear in your job description from the very beginning, like with your hiring manager and your intake call, that's our job, I feel, as recruiters, to really understand what is it that you're looking for, not just from a technical standpoint, like what programs do you need for a candidate to have, but why is it important for them to have that? Tell me about what your working style, like what your management style is like. Tell me about what it's like to work on the team. If someone is remote and chooses to work remotely because they live in the middle of the US, and as someone, I'm from the UK, so the US is massive. The fact that there are a number of different time zones is I'm still getting used to it. But to have someone there versus in New York, where that person who's in New York can walk to the office or do whatever and have a different experience, how is that going to differ? How are you, hiring manager, going to make their experience and their job the same if they come in at the same level? And so those types of questions, I feel that's on us to be able to really discover what the hiring manager is looking for, not from I want this, and this. It's tell me more about what someone is going to experience when they come onto your job, and for us to then put that into the job description and say, here's, if it is fully remote, great. What does that mean? Like, how does that showcase itself? And putting that in addition to the job description, in addition to the other bits and pieces into the job description. So I hope that kind of outlines a little bit. I know that we're pushing for time, so I want to pause there and just kind of nudge along. But I feel like that was a great kind of a great segue. I love the on the spot question. So fun time.
Awesome. No, I think I'm glad we spent some time on that, because I think that's some of the biggest challenges that we always face in TA, making sure that the candidates have the best experience, because the butterfly effect, especially in markets that are the equilibrium of talent to roles is not kind of aligned. So we'll move on to the third question, and Steve, I'm going to put you last on this one because I know you have a lot of opinions when it comes to AI and ML. So we'll put you last in it. But Sharon, on your side, AI and ML is kind of on everyone's mind at the moment, and I know when we first caught up, you were talking about how the team are using AI and ML products. So love to get your kind of take on what you're doing internally.
Yeah, so I think some people don't realize they're using AI, even though they may be, just because a lot of tools that we use now already have existing AI built in. Maybe there's a feature that uses an algorithm that uses machine learning. And so you may be using it without knowing it. And our team is consciously making an effort to embed some of this into our practices. For example, if you've ever used Otter for note-taking in your interviews, you're already using AI because they use a natural language algorithm to transcript your interview notes. So some of us are using it without knowing, and some of us are using it consciously. And my team has been using tools like ChatGPT. I know that's a big one in the market right now. A lot of us have heard of it. If you've played around with it, you know that it can help you write a job description. It can help you get started on some of the work that you need to do. A few weeks ago, I was asking it questions about how to create non-dilutive incentive programs, just to compare what ChatGPT had to say versus what our company is doing. And it's like an ask a friend. So instead of asking maybe 3 or 4 peers, it helps you pull together a really quick view. And it's not something that, is going to replace me or you in your role, but it's something that can actually supplement the work that we're doing, help us move along quicker, gain some efficiencies along the way. We're trialing different things on our team, seeing how we can embed it into the work that we do. But as our company is really interested in the AI space and embedding that into the products, I think it's great for us to also be keeping up with the technology and understanding how we can apply that in our roles specifically and how that impacts the organization at large.
Awesome. Andy?
Yeah, so I mean, for our team particularly, we are aware of it, not necessarily using it, as it is. As a broader business, there are elements where working for a publishing firm, so we've got certain ways of doing of getting a book from manuscript to shelf or audio. And so parts of that process we're kind of experimenting, and by we it means the authors, the editors, and all of that sort of things. So there's lots of things that are kind of going on at the moment. For us, we're still, it's not something that immediately we're looking at and saying yes, we're absolutely going to push ahead with it. And so I wanted to kind of volunteer. We're aware of, but not necessarily using it at the moment.
Awesome. Steve, over to you.
Okie dokie. Hopefully not too long-winded. Back in 2016, if anybody here wants to do a little bit of internet searching while they're listening to this, I wrote an article on SourceCon. It was called "Artificially Stupid Recruiting." It's a good title, Andy. It's one of those things. But it was a two-parter that between me and my friend Rob McIntosh, and this was the first real 2 articles, really in-depth analysis of this. Caveat: back in my engineering days, back in the 80s, I was building some of the precursors to all this stuff. We used to call it expert systems. And some of you who've read my stuff or heard me speak know that I've used the phrase, if it's written in Python, it's machine learning. If it's written in PowerPoint, it's AI. There's a lot of there's AI, there's mind-blowing AI, and then there's very narrow AI. GTP, it's very narrow AI. It takes its cue from data sets are out there. If you use AI, ChatGPT, for example, to write some engaging outreach emails, invariably you're going to find one of the first lines is, "I hope this email finds you well," because that's what's out there. And if ever there was something that was wrong with us, it's as a profession, we dive into the shallow pool of TA technology without checking to see how deep the water is first. And if you start foisting AI-related stuff on processes that are inefficient or suboptimal, that's where the artificial stupidity comes in. The first step before you bring any technology into your stack is first, look at what it is you're looking to optimize. What is the problem? Test it, demo it. look at ways in which you could simplify your process. The simpler the process, the greater the impact of automation tools, by the way. And that's one thing that we're sort of reticent to do. We go for it's the shiny object syndrome. AI sourcing, AI onboarding, AI calendar scheduling. Firstly, there's no one here who wouldn't raise their hand and jump for joy for AI scheduling. But it's still early stage for all these things. And at this point, I am not concerned about AI taking away 50% of the jobs, for example, that Bill Foreman likes to say pretty regularly. I was there when PCs first came in the workplace, when the 8088 PC weighed like 42 pounds. Everyone here been around, knows that horrible, grinding sound that it used to make. It was supposed to change everything. It didn't. We adapted. New roles, new opportunities, new jobs, new tasks came to fore. 1998 or so, this is just after Al Gore developed the internet. It was supposed to change everything. It didn't. For a few years, it did escalate prices for engineers, but as soon as some of the monsters and headhunters and OCCs started becoming more savvy, the salaries came down. The tools were able to help us become more efficient, created new jobs. That's when sourcing started taking off. The internet is the reason why sourcing really came to be. And so here we are for the AI era. For those who are not curious, you should be scared, because if you're not willing to go down rabbit holes and try things with whatever it might be, you're going to be, you won't be replaced, but your role is going to be diminished. So I am not concerned about AI taking away jobs. I'm more concerned about AI creating new jobs. And then, the savvy TA leaders like here, how are we going to restructure? How are we going to strategize? How are we going to become more advisors to the folks up at the top, the C levels, who really are smitten with the shiny objects and are wondering, why aren't we bringing that in here? They're doing it. Why aren't we doing it? We're going to have the answers because we've been curious. We've been innovative. We go down the rabbit holes. We share the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, that's where every paradigm shift, Q and the structure of scientific revolution, every paradigm shift has created, two types of people: those who are scared of it and those who are excited by it. Those who are excited by it are going to find new ways to use it that others didn't think about, and that's going to create more jobs.
Yeah, I love that as an ending point. That's my opinion on AI as a whole as well, that it's not going to take over roles, it's going to change roles, and it's about being able to adapt to the new world, and everything changes. Like even I've been in recruitment and TA for 10 years now, 11 years now, and the way that I worked back then would be very different the way that I worked now. But as Steve said, we've all become curious, and the best people in the industry will be looking at new technology, new ways of working, and adapting to it rather than being fearful that it's about to take over their role, because it's probably not. It's just that the way you're working will change. I think moving on to a subject of what the market looks like from a TA perspective right now, I think everyone has seen it in the last couple of months that TA has been massively hit as a result of layoffs across the US and globally. So keen to get some advice from everyone on this panel today. So what advice would you give to those that have been affected by recent layoffs? Danielle, I'll start with yourself.
Oh, sure. There's an art to networking, and that's how recruiting even began as a profession, right? You met people, you understood what they wanted to do, where you could introduce them to others, and hope there was some type of match, whether from a skill or relationship or personality, and let them take it from there. The art of networking, I think, has taken a few hits. We've relied so much on automation and the mass uploading of resumes, or you click once and it goes everywhere. This team knows, we've talked about this. I when I first started out in recruiting, I spent most of my time having coffee and dinner and lunches, and if I was at my desk, then I was not recruiting. And that was what my boss would say to me: if I see you, then you're not recruiting, right? That's a problem. And now it's like, where are you? Why are you not at your desk? You should be able to respond immediately. I want us to get back to the ability to have those connections, those human connections of knowing people, knowing more than just what's on a resume is paper thin, right? And it's probably out of date the minute you save it to a PDF. And so how do you actually get to know people? And as a recruiter, that's your value, is let me make sure that I not only present you with the right candidate or a good candidate, but I also make sure I don't present you with the wrong candidate or someone's going to waste your time, whether your time or their time, right? You also want to keep relationships with candidates. The first person that a candidate usually trusts with an organization is the recruiter. They share a lot about themselves with that person. They give so much intimate information. People don't share their salaries with their families, and they're telling us, what they want to make and what they're looking to do with their careers and where they want to be in a few years, and why they're leaving their organization. And some of that's really deep and so really personal. And you have to trust somebody to do that. And you don't trust someone just because you sent your resume into an applicant tracking system. And so that relationship, that networking, that ability to have a quality conversation, I just want people to continue to do that. I know you wanted these answers probably be short and sweet, but I think talent acquisition teams that rely so heavily on their tech stack can sometimes be paralyzed if the internet's out. They don't know how to pick up a phone and call somebody, or make use of their time when something's not running that day, and that's not recruiting, right? That's picking. You want to make sure that people are still understanding the why behind what we're doing and the importance behind what we're doing, and not it just be a list of tasks and processes of a process map that we're going through. So
love it. And there's
I'm open for coffee.
There's no problem with a longer answer. If it's enlightening, then amazing. Andy, over to yourself.
Yeah, this is such an interesting one for me. I feel like quality over quantity, I think, is a big thing for me, and trying to kind of like hearing what anyone's just saying about just now, like it just kind of made me cast my mind back, like, and I know there's been a couple of questions either in the chat or on one of the posts that we made and around KPIs. What KPIs would you want to focus on? And for me, I would sort of break it down, and so to answer the question, like, what advice do I have is whether if you've been laid off, or if you're looking for a new role, or if you feel uncertain, or however you're feeling, whatever your situation, break everything down to things you can control, right? And so most of that is going to be your outbound. Is going to be like things that are with it, that you can look and sit at your desk and think, okay, what am I going to be able to do today, right? So I've been laid off before. So in 2008, when all things went just completely was upended, as I was laid off at that point. It was an awful period of time, and my dad gave me the best advice, and it's always stuck with me, is just, okay, great, what do you want to do now? Like, the world doesn't care about your feelings. What do you want to do, right? And so it kind of, at the time, I was like, well, that's a harsh thing to say. I've just been laid off. And he's like, yeah, but you still have bills to pay. You still have all of these things, right? And when you break it down that way, just kind of think, how would I approach it if the market was good? You would still approach your day, right? And the KPIs, I think, for me, is the really important piece, particularly with quality. And so I gave myself a minimum. So I was walked to the door, and they were like, off you go. We'll give you your severance and good luck. And so then from there, I was like, I'm a free agent. I can do whatever I want. So I made myself, I made myself research, and I looked at companies that I thought I wanted to work for. And then I identified the people that would probably be in decision making positions that made me think these are people that I want to network with. And I want to highlight on the network because it is so important. Don't just send an invite and be like, hey, I'd love to add myself to your network, and then you pester them with lots of messages being like, do you have a job for me? Right? That's not networking. Networking is trying to understand and build and showcase your experience within an environment that is going to benefit all parties, not just you. And so think about the quality, think about how you're coming across, think about what you can do to showcase and then follow up, right? Don't just do a one-off and be like, oh, well, they didn't get back to me, so I'll move on to the next one. Do your due diligence and focus on what is going to help you, and then think about I was my own recruiter. I was like, what my conversion rate? So I would look at who I've connected with, who's come back to me, who hasn't, like, what's the number, what am I doing? And then I would adjust it. And then I'd move from connections to then phone calls, and then phone calls to then meetings, and then meetings to then interviews, regardless of whether they had a job or not. And that was, for me, the most important piece. Was I didn't care whether they had an open position, because I was trying to recruit for me and creating an opportunity. And one of the best stories that I've ever learned or loved telling is one of the companies I worked at in the 2008-2009 downturn. Our top performer for the company I worked at then, she was in the banking environment, and she was the top performer in the US within banking in a time where banking was barely hiring. It's because she knew every single person. And so the networking piece was really important. It was not like, knowledge is power. And going a step further, this kind of links with what Steve said, go down the rabbit hole. Like look at how companies perform, link some of your networking to saying, hey, I saw this article written by someone in your audit part, or whatever area you think you specialize in, or your technology team. I saw this really interesting article. How does this align with what you're looking at? Like try and link to more than just you, and showcase your knowledge. That, I believe, will really help. And be your own recruiter, but break it down into bite-sized pieces, and make sure you are able to manage all of that. Don't overcommit. Break it down into bite-sized chunks, and then at the end of the day, give yourself a little pat on the back, regardless whether you've had a good or bad day from a KPI perspective. Do the work. That will help you immeasurably.
We're going to move on to you next, Sharon, but I think just a point from my side on something you said there, Andy. I think the networking, it's not just take. You need to be giving too. So if you are speaking to someone and you're networking with them, you need to be. And Danielle, actually, the first time we met, one of the things you said to me was, great, so I've asked you loads of questions, like, how can I help you? So I think that's one of the things that everyone should be thinking about. It's not just taking back from the person you're reaching out to. How else can you help them? Because there's probably some knowledge you can impart on them that they would love to hear about. But if you're only asking questions about what you can get from them, you're missing half the value of networking. Sharon, I'm going to pass over to you just off the back of that point.
Yeah, so I think my advice would be to be unconventional. And, if you've always been employed in a full-time capacity, now might be the time to think about freelancing, consulting, contract versus full-time. So I know we've been fortunate enough to, in this uncertain market, extend some contract offers. We've been able to convert one to a full-time role and hopefully more. But those are just ways to kind of get your foot in the door and maybe explore a broader opportunity down the line. I think being creative in your search is also going to help. That if you have some downtime, there's a ton of HR and talent communities out there that you can join. A Slack community, you can go and answer some questions on a Q&A board that might help you with networking, that might make you some new connections that could lead to an opportunity as well. So the other flip side of it is, if you're fortunate enough to be employed, think about who you know. So when you see a role pop up on your feed, make an introduction, send it to someone who is looking, write a recommendation. There's a lot of things that we can be doing proactively to help others, since we have a lot of visibility, but there's also things that we can be doing that are maybe different to our past strategy or approach to a search. And I think there's been an influx of candidates in the TA space. And I think, being creative and, going beyond just the networking and trying to think of other ways that you may get some visibility over other candidates, can get a way to, use some of your knowledge and your wisdom and help out others in the process. That would also go a long way. You might want to blog, you might want to, put some content out there that can come up in a search. So make yourself easy to find. Be out there with your knowledge and your experience, and be unconventional.
Awesome. And then we'll go to you finally, Steve.
The damn unmute button gets me every time. A few things here, in no special order. You were asked about KPIs. I actually did a webinar earlier this week with someone we all know about recruiting metrics, and the challenge is, and recruiting metrics cover two categories. There are those that can impact, to give insight into the operational performance based of the process, and there are those metrics that can be used for individual coaching and performance. It's always good to look at, when you're trying to prepare yourself for a job search, is talk about metrics that cover both sides. And I think most TA organizations metric dashboard tends to lean one way, more operational than individual performance. And so you're going to have to be your own advocate. You may have to really go look back on how you've done things, how you perform, and create your own dashboard. That just, hopefully you'll have you have some you have the data for that. The biggest thing is it's everyone has said this, it's learn. There's an endless supply of stuff to learn in our profession. If you're doing tech recruiting, not surprisingly, many tech recruiters don't get that granular with that which they're recruiting. Take a little course on, learn about microservices, learn about, the 4 different categories of APIs. That's, as someone who is an engineer, that's power. There's a big difference between throwing out a phrase and thinking you understand it, versus take a simple Udemy course in JavaScript programming or Python programming. Think of it as a ways to become better at data scraping or something like that. Or Brett Feig just recently used ChatGPT to help create a LinkedIn scraper. You require a little bit of work, but learn something that you don't know. Architecture, your software architecture is massive. Machine learning, there are 130 plus algorithms. Learn some of these things. Ask the people inside, which ones do we really use? And then write a little paper to yourself. Use ChatGPT, fine. Learn something. Third is help. Those who know me, I've been putting out I call it the George Boole job search series on LinkedIn, in which I take a fancy picture of George Boole and color his glasses, but offer Boolean searches that can be used by every job seeker. Share, learn things, give this back. What are your secrets? If you've been a recruiter, open up the forbidden door, go behind the forbidden door and tell the people. You don't want to excoriate your former employer, but tell people how you actually read resumes, whether you read cover letters or not. Share this information. The more you help people, the more they'll help you. And the fourth one is, I say they're the 2 most important social media tools. You're going to like this, Danielle, are the telephone and the handshake. I call you whenever the spirit moves me. Darren, others here not so much, but y'all can expect calls from me now on out of the blue. Call people when somebody puts something out for a cry for help. As others have said, don't just click like. Connect with them, message them. Ask them what they're looking for. Who are your target company? Give them ideas. Look, I'll make a call for you. Those who know me know I will physically make calls to people for you. Be that kind of person, that kind of recruiter that people want to know as a person. You do that, and your brand, that's your brand. I'm going to say it again. I may be technical, but the older I get and the longer I spend in this profession, I'm craving two things: honesty and simplicity. Let that apply to your job search. And like I said, be a lifelong, borrow from Jerry Crispin, borrow from the hat, be a lifelong learner. Make a plan to learn something next week that you didn't know this week, and do that every week, and then share that with other people.
Love that. We'll move back into the Q&A just so we get a couple of them answered. There's a question that we will answer right at the end, but I think we can probably do that in a 1 or 2 word answer, just because it's a future-proofing kind of question. So, Steve, I know actually you said good one. I'll get this into the convo. I don't feel like we've actually got back to that yet. So I'm going to throw one straight at you. So have any of you run mentor mentee programs at companies that you've worked at over the past few years? Curious how impactful they've been in the new world we work in.
Heavily, that's something that we did at Zip. We had a very, very good EM there start a weekly mentoring program, and it's something that blossomed into every engineer knew that they could go higher up and ask any question that they wanted. How do I do this? How do I do that? The challenge that I'm going to throw some names into. Darren, don't get mad at me if it's a bad person, but Adam Gordon is pushing his recruiter enablement platform. I think it's recruiter enablement.io. I'm not 100% sure of it, but the best mentor programs are one in which you're continuously sharing. We had regular at Zip. We had regular, lunch and learns. Sharing, teaching people how to learn about all these technical things. Talk about engagement, what works, what doesn't work. How to get, how to conduct a better intake session. How to conduct a better interview training session. How to conduct a better debrief session. I'd have people sit in with me while I do, hardcore technical interviews. It has to be part of the way we do business. That's just something that I've been doing for easily, 25 plus years. Share, if it works, let people see, by the way, your failures. None of us got to this stage in our career without screwing up royally. And it's important for people to see that, even accomplished, TA leaders like us do screw up from time to time, perhaps more often than others than we want to admit, but show people that it's okay to do that. It's okay to fail. It's okay to fear. But, we did a good job of that at Zip from an engineering perspective and other places that I've been. Make it part of the way you do business every day.
Awesome. Anyone else on the panel got any input on this?
I have a bit of a different take on it, Steve. And so I apologize to all of those on the call who actually run their mentor-mentee programs at their companies. But very young in my career, I had someone say to me, if you have to ask me if I'm your mentor, then I'm not. And, I, of course, quite young and quite green and like, what does that mean? And it's, if there's this forced need that we have to be connected and I'm forcing these one-on-ones with each other and I'm here to just like have coffee with you and talk about things, it's not necessarily a mentor mentee. This is a meeting, right? And with an agenda, and it's a very different kind of relationship. And so organizations, what you described, Steve, to me, as I was listening to you, that sounded more like this is our culture where we have an open environment where people are accessible, where we're sharing knowledge, where we're overly communicating, where we're making people, available to each other, and we're making sure that no one kind of sits in that ivory tower. And so whether that's a formal or informal program, I think is super important to have. So I'm not taking away the fact that companies should absolutely say, hey, we have people, I've worked places where we had a buddy system. Again, it sounds silly, but just the different use of that word is very different than this one person is supposed to be teaching me, right? Whereas as buddies or whatever word you want to use, where you come together as peers and equals and someone I can share, you can share, we can have a very different relationship. we go back to the first question you asked, Darren, about power. Sometimes this mentor-mentee relationship predicts a little bit of there's sort of someone more in power than the other. And I know a lot of companies have started to say, well, let's do the reverse mentor program where, you know, the younger folks are teaching our older folks how to use, you know, social media and this and that, and they're trying to do all this. And again, what you don't want is someone holding the power in that relationship. You don't want someone sort of being on, you know, this side of the table. And I think that what you want to do is just make it part of your culture to say, we are an accessible organization. We don't hide information, right? This is, you want to sit in on this meeting, it's open to all in the organization, so you can learn about our department or our team. Having formal internal career fairs where you expose what one group does to other groups so people understand what those departments do. Having lunch and learns, having one person just be available to talk about their path and their successes, but mostly their failures. You know, that's very different than saying, we're going to match you with someone based on some, you know, form you filled out. And now the two of you are forced to have coffee or lunch together once a month. And then you have to come back at the end of the year and go, did it work? You know, I would love to know if years from now, those people even still talk to each other. You know, what you want is a relationship to be built versus, you know, a program to be built. So a little bit of a different take, but I agree what you're doing, Steve. I just wouldn't necessarily call that a mentor-mentee program.
I completely agree with you. I mean,
Sorry.
no, come
All
on,
those,
each other
well, there's a lot of people who
we-
make a career out of running those, and I
No,
am
no.
so grateful that they do them. But yeah,
No, and Dee and I have known each other long. We've had these conversations
Yeah.
ad nauseum. You know, part of it, there has to be some structure to it.
Mhm.
You know, if there's no structure to it, firstly, the structure is we have a program. How it's done,
Right.
Let it happen. You know, this is not like and maybe I'm dating myself. This is not like, you know, Dr. Zhivago, matchmaker, make me a match. It's nothing horrible like that. And I've just dated myself completely. No one knows what I'm talking about, which is fine. But you know, it's stuff that happens because you know, the people involved love to do it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to pay me to call to if someone asks for my help. That's it. You know, okay, it'll owe you a cup of coffee. You'll owe me a cup of coffee down the line. There's got to be some cost to it, some skin in the game. But that's what the best mentors are the ones who take it personally when others aren't sharing and caring.
Yeah.
You know,
but
we
I
have
think
this-
we go back to organizations that will sometimes make that as part of a management track or a promotion track to say,
Oh,
have
yeah.
you been a mentor? Have you been participating in our social activities? Have you been participating in our CSR activities? You know, this gives you more exposure. This makes you more promotable. And what you don't want is someone to make this a checkbox on something they have to do in order to achieve their goals. Because again, it will never be authentic. It will never be a relationship. And then it's failed from the onset. And so I think if you are going to have a program, really think about the people who raise their hand, who want to be mentors or who want to just share and not want the title of mentor, but just someone who is excited about putting their hand out and helping somebody along. Is a very different mentality than I am the mentor, you are the mentee, I will teach you the ways of our organization, and forever we will go down this is the way it's always been done cycle of our organization. You just don't want to get caught in that.
Yeah, stay away from the indoctrination.
Awesome. We've got 6 minutes left, so I want to get one more question in before the end. I'm going to save the question that we originally did have from the topics. I think that this one is probably more important for the audience. And I'm going to start with you on this one because this is actually from a recent college graduate just looking to secure their first role in publishing. So very relatable from that side. But the question is around advice and insights that the panel can share regarding ways to catch the attention of TA recruiters. And then any comments around being ATS compliant from resumes and any strategies on that side? Sure.
So first of all, thank you. I think I'll try to be as succinct as possible. I think this should go to everybody, regardless of whether it's publishing, whether it's technology, whether it's banking, whether it's finance, whatever it is. The most important thing in all of my experience is do what is asked of you. And so if in the job description it says, please do these things, do those things. If you're not doing those things, it suggests you're not attentive to detail. It suggests that you're, if I, as your future manager, if I ask you to do something, you might not do it. So if it's like in our example, and I'll use publishing, so it might say, please put a cover letter and a resume. And you would be surprised the number of people who don't actually add one or the sometimes neither. And maybe that's a little bit of an ATS issue, but rarely. So in terms of being compliant with an ATS, that's harder because there are so many out there. I've worked with, I think, 9 different ones in my entire history of recruiting, and they're all drastically different. So step number 1, do you want to ask? Step number 2, how to set yourself aside. I think the most important thing is know that we do, like, I will absolutely look through everybody's application because I want to make sure that I give everyone a fair shot. So are there things that we can and do use? Sure, there's keywords, there's Booleans that Steve mentioned, there's Boolean searches that we can offer that we will run to try and identify the best in the short period of time. Absolutely. But if you're not doing the bare minimum, then it's less likely that you're going to be considered. So how do you then increase and spend that time maximizing on that? I think one of the biggest things is showing, and this kind of highlights what I mentioned previously, is showing your knowledge. And I think Stephen and everyone is going to mention, like, knowledge is power. Like, knowing more about what you're doing and what you're looking to do and showcasing that is really important. How can you do that? You can tailor your resume. You can showcase that if it says must be attentive to detail, but in your resume there's lots of spelling errors and grammatical mistakes, that suggests you're not. Like, so you've got to kind of like for like. And I always encourage anyone to spend the time, read the job description, but more importantly, read every single element that you're sending to someone. Because once you apply to a job and you realize you've made a mistake, it's really hard to undo that mistake. And in an environment where it's so competitive as publishing and or most technology is, it's hard to then kind of undo that. And so try to be as attentive to detail as possible. Tailor your resume, tailor your cover letter, do what it asks you to do. I hope that helps. That's a very abridged-ish version in the 2 minutes. And I'm leaving
awesome. Awesome. Sharon, I'm going to give you the lucky opportunity to be the last person on this. Have you got anything you'd add to what Andy just said there?
I agree with him. And I would just say the other thing is to focus on your transferable skills, especially coming out of school. What else have you done that you can showcase and bring to light that can get the attention of recruiters? I'm going to keep it at that just because I know we're short on time.
Awesome. Well, you kept that so short. I'm going to give the opportunity to Steve and Danielle. Steve, it's going to be you. Keep it short, but anything else you'd add on top of that? And he can't find the unmute button. There we go.
I found the look. What everyone said. I'm going to say straight up is create alerts. If there are certain companies, certain functions, create. Go to news sites. There are news sites for every industry, for every possible company. I'm going to do a Boolean, another series for LinkedIn in a couple of days on that one. And look for things that pertain to the business. Post it on the Blue Devil, post it on Facebook, post it on Twitter, tagging someone who is likely going to be the manager or a recruiter or something like that. Rules, there are these rules that you're supposed to follow in job search. Break them. Completely break them. Tag someone in a post. Make sure they see it. You want to, email them at work. If by some chance a recruiter has their phone number on their LinkedIn profile, text them. It's there. Break the rules. You're the one who's going to come out ahead.
Awesome.
I would say call them versus text, but that's just me.
Oh, well, no, I'm fine. No, Andy, I'm fine. I would. I'm a pick up the phone person, even though I'm an engineer. But An engineer, I'll text. And anybody not in tech, I'll call.
Awesome. So I'm mindful we're in the final 30 seconds, or we've already gone into the 1:30 Eastern time zone now. So just wanted to say thank you to all the attendees, but also to the panelists for being a part of this. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed the session as much as we have. I think just going back to a previous point, network. If you want to reach out to myself, if you want to reach out to any of the panelists, please do. You can find all of us on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer any further questions you've got. I have tracked all of the questions that we've not been able to get through to. So I'm going to try over the next couple of days circulating answers to that as well, going to the panelists and getting them. But yeah, thanks so much for everyone's time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Anything I can do to help, just ask. I might even call you.
Take care all. Bye-bye.
Bye all.